What's up with the waves?
Well, it's aloha. So, hello, Amy.
Hi, Amy. Hi, Katie.
Hey, mics are live, just so you know.
And we're live, ready to go.
We're live and ready to go.
Okay, I'm going to call to order this, the Planning Commission meeting of October 12th at 4:30. And present are Mary and Tony and Aaron, myself, Jerry, and Laura. And I guess Steve, is he online or not? He is online.
Yep,
So
I'm
everybody
here.
else is in attendance and Steve is on line. First thing is citizens to be heard on a topic that's not on the agenda here. Seeing none and no hands out in the audience there. Ex parte communications and disclosures. Do we have any? Seeing none. And then approval of the minutes. And I'm going to say something here because I think Stephen Stock isn't here.
He is.
He's
He
here.
signed on.
Oh, he's online. Stephen, do you want to say something then?
That would be great. Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me. Essentially, what we need to do is record the votes for the recommendation for the new Planning and Zoning Commissioner. I know the folks had a vote last time, but we just need to make sure that the votes correlated with the individuals and make sure that the minutes reflected the votes and for whom they voted for to be in compliance with OPMA.
And Steve, I'm right, we would like to put those in the minutes.
Correct. And I just want to make sure if we put them in the minutes, that any individual, we just want to make sure that the minutes that are recorded are fair. So just to make sure if they're already contained in the minutes, we don't necessarily have to go through them, but I just want to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to make sure that their vote was reflected in the manner in which they cast it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So I guess I would move to amend their motion so that our votes are recorded.
Is that okay? Sure. Okay, how many in favor of that amended motion? And I guess I have to go back and say, then how many are in favor of the whole motion with that amendment? This is that funny parliamentary procedure. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Steve. And the thing I should mention is our bylaws probably need to be revised slightly. It says in there that you can vote either by hand or by, kind of orally or by a written ballot. And the written ballot thing could either be changed to a signed written ballot, which would be perfectly okay, or we could simply eliminate it and just vote by hand. I'm not going to propose a bylaw change now, but we should put it on the agenda probably for our next meeting so that it's real clear. I read those bylaws. I saw a written ballot. I'm the one who then suggested, well, let's do a written ballot. And I should have remembered somewhere in the dark past when we didn't have just a single person applying that, for some reason we signed ballots. We didn't do what we're supposed to do now. If we do sign ballots, which will be signed ballots, and then they're going to be read who voted for who, is my understanding. If we decide to keep that procedure, it's kind of a funny procedure at that point. But anyway, okay.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes.
I thought we did sign the ballots.
I didn't.
We're supposed to sign it out.
Oh, darn.
Instructions on the ballots. To print your
I
name.
signed the ballot. All right.
I don't think I
Well,
signed.
you were the only one who did.
Oh. I was even a worse person there. Okay. So we've approved the minutes. And is Trish here? She is here for a report. You've been on vacation.
I've been
been on vacation, so I don't have anything. So that's perfect. Are you guys okay with that? Do you have questions for me? I hope not. Thanks.
Any updates from staff of anything particularly concerning to us that went on at the last commission meeting? We'll take
Say
that
no.
as a no, and there has been a request from Jerry that we change the agenda so that we move the public hearing in front of our long discussion of the land use code. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, we're gonna go move that and go into the public hearing. So I'm opening the public hearing at 4:37, we'll say. And I guess staff first.
All right, so as per usual, whenever I'm going through these, I do like to bring up a map just to illustrate the area that we are talking about. This is the public hearing to consider a rezone for the large lot residential parcel at 1540 Spanish Valley Drive. Rezone application is requesting a rezone from large lot residential to neighborhood commercial. So the parcel itself is 3.13 acres, which would be significant for either one of these zones. Currently, it contains one single family dwelling, one shop structure, one office trailer, and several storage containers. So the surrounded uses for the area include single family dwellings, vacant parcels, as well as three general business parcels directly adjacent and down Spanish Valley Drive. There are several other nodes of general business that are within about 1,000 feet of this particular parcel, and we can see them here on the vicinity map in this area, as well as bordering 191. The current business in operation at the property is Moab Heat and Cool, which until the spring of 2023 had been operating under a home occupation license. This business operation consists of the assembly and repair of HVAC appliances. Per Land Use Code Article 10 definitions, this would be permitted in the use category of limited retail sales and service, which allows the repair of household appliances. So essentially, this parcel is currently being used for commercial activities. And there's been a long history of this as well. So while the limited repair retail sales is not permitted in the large lot residential zone, so in its current zoning, according to our land use chart, it would be a permitted use within neighborhood commercial. So in the event that the commission chooses to deny the rezone, the course of action for enforcement includes a requirement for all commercial activity on the property to cease. Commercial equipment would be required to be removed from the property, and the commercial activity will cease within the allotted time frame. That would be dependent upon commission. So that would be county commission to determine that time frame. Okay, there are associated penalties that go with this. Penalties specifically by Land Use Code Section 1.9, as well as County Ordinance 669. If anybody wants details on that, we can talk about that as we go on. So there is, like I said, a long history on this one. I would like to propose an amendment to this, to the staff report specifically. We have the staff recommendation at the end, which was neutral, and we would actually like to change that. So I think you actually have my recommendation, unfortunately. Thank you, Laura. So, and actually you can pass these around because Melanie just gave me one. So this is a recommendation for each of you to look at, just to have words whenever it comes to motions. So at this point, the staff recommendation would be to forward an unfavorable recommendation to the county commission. And the reason for that is that the proposed zone change is not in compliance with the general plan or the future land plan for this area. Everything that we have in terms of future land use maps or the general plan designates this area as a residential zone. and at best multifamily residential zone. There's no commercial use in our general plan for this particular area. Anything else to add from staff?
I did have a question of staff, which was basically, it doesn't look like it fits kind of the purpose of the neighborhood commercial. And then yet it has it on the use table as maybe a qualifying use. Do we pay kind of equal weight to both of those? Are both of those relevant in our decision? How does that work?
Amy, do you want to field that?
Hi, Commissioners. Amy Weiser, I'm the new Planning Director. Chairman O'Brien, when you say both of those, would you clarify for me what you mean?
I meant if it says in the use table that this is use here, and yet the purpose reads neighborhood commercial district is designed to accommodate neighbors' retail uses serving the immediate surrounding residential area, neighborhood retail bases providing daily and frequently bought items. Those two things might be
Sure.
not the same for this particular property, but the purpose also has an impact reason for voting as well as use.
That is correct, yeah. And yeah, there's a little bit of a discrepancy going on there, but the use statement does sort of drive the overall purpose of that zone. And then the use table is supposed to then reflect that purpose statement. So in this case, I think that what they were getting at with as far as spelling out those different uses, I think that at the time, I can't speak for that. I think they were trying to consider as many uses as possible that might fit in that zone. But the purpose and the intent of that statement is a little bit more tighter than the uses. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions on the staff report?
Yeah, I got a couple. So the neighborhood commercial, we are trying to redefine that, right? So would this fit in the newer definition?
And I'm just learning about that as far as what's happening with this code revisions they're coming, and we currently have some consultants working on a general plan revision for the land use code. So all I can say is that for this decision this evening, you have to look at the code as it stands now, not what might be coming.
And then I also had a question. When it was permitted, or when it was operating as doing sheet metal manufacturing, this might be Mary asking the archives. This was in the 90s, right? And what was the zoning then for, like, were we calling it large lot residential then? What was the idea?
I believe the zoning was still residential. Is that
It was
correct?
still large lot residential, but they never permitted it. It was never a commercial use that was permitted.
Uh-huh.
They did the sheet metal.
Okay, so they were just kind of getting away with it back then. Okay.
And you also got to realize that was way before, that was a few years before the NEPA laws came through,
Uh-huh.
where a lot of changes were made to the land use code. And
It
then
was
they
before that.
abandoned it. So
They abandoned it and then
use,
the change came in.
and it went back to LLR.
Okay,
I mean, they weren't allowed to do that there anyway.
right,
And they were sent letters. It wasn't like they were allowed to do it. They
Right.
just kept doing it.
right.
And we didn't have a code enforcement officer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's, trying to make that as a part of what's going on now.
Well, I'm wondering if it was zoned, improperly zoned the first time. That's where I'm getting at.
No, and every general plan has never put that in as commercial. When Packard's went in, it went in it wasn't even an allowed use at that time. When Packard went in, once again, it was way before LUPA. And when we went through one of our general plans, the zoning map or the zoning uses then brought Packard in. And then when the subdivision that's adjacent to it came in, that was specific during that subdivision. They asked for that zone change because it was right there on the highway. And that's,
Okay,
so they all went in properly.
okay.
Properly. But this one was, never. This particular lot has never been a part of any commercials. They're calling it limited repair services, but if you go into your section of the land use code, 3.14 or whatever it is, it specifies 3.410. It's calling it out as building, heating, plumbing, or electrical contractors as the use, not repair services, because limited repair services would be fixing computers and stuff like that, not necessarily doing HVAC. It's an HVAC company. So I question that section right there. This section of the code.
Process stuff works, but I just want to make sure we're doing this right. Should the commission, the planning commission, hold substantive questions until there's a hearing on the floor and we've heard from them?
Yeah, they should be, we should be asking staff questions about their report that we might not understand at this point. So, but we shouldn't get into discussion about it. Thank you. Okay, any more?
And just one other comment, Steve is asking that everybody speak into the microphone.
Sorry,
And
Steve.
Good.
Mary, I have a hard time hearing you from here.
I'm sorry, I'll try and speak louder. I've been yelling at a kid all day.
Do we have a representative from the, who's for this rezone? Who wants to speak? Okay, then I guess we have citizens to be heard, and I don't know what order exactly to do that in. Somebody want to come up and make a comment? Yes. But please state your name.
And if you would sign it on the sheet too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we don't have a microphone so Steve can hear, I guess, do we?
Yeah.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Jay Nethercott. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm going to keep it really short. Beginning a couple of years ago, a bunch of people, a lot of county officials, put a lot of work into getting a handle on this problem. It's been ongoing for years and years and years. And, I put up with it for a long time, and so did the neighbors, because we just kind of, mellow, trying to be mellow. But eventually it got out of hand. It got noisier and noisier and more out of control. And so eventually I contacted the county attorney, which was Christina Simone at the time. And she said, email me, let's get started on it. We did. We got the compliance officer involved. And we spent weeks, months and months and months trying to get that situation under control. Mostly got ignored. Those people evidenced a contemptuous disregard for authority. They were sneaky and deceptive, and they were not being good neighbors. But eventually, we got them to sign a home occupancy business license, which they eventually did. And as I'm not sure if you know, but that's a very restricted license. That allows them 3 vehicles, 3 employees. All the work has to be, on and on and on. It's a very limited thing. It's supposed to blend into a neighborhood. And they did not spend 1 minute, not 1 minute complying with that. They were going full speed the next day. Trucks, cars, I counted 7 dead vehicles in the bottom of the drainage alone. Just dead laying down. Okay. I don't know how many vehicles are. There's delivery trucks, beep, beep, it just goes on and on and on. These people have evidenced a complete disregard for the feelings of the neighbors. You've heard testimony, and I am here to ask you to revoke that home occupancy permit and return that to full-on residential. I think that those people have not evidenced good faith at all in what they agreed to and what they signed the documents. So I'm going to ask that their home occupancy permit be revoked.
Good, thank you. And very good. Hold comments to about 3 minutes if you can. Next.
I've got a little video on zip drive. Okay, well, I'll explain what's going on. Seeking staff report, all the problems that have been.
Can you state your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, James French. I live at 1585 Rocky Road. I share a property line with Moab Eagle. About the problems with the dust, the garbage coming off site, the trespassing, the noise violations, and everything else that's been going. It's all well documented in the staff report and from the last meeting. The video I wanted to show is they had these large delivery vans pull up. There's no place on the compound where they can turn around. They have to back down about a quarter of the way down the road, make a 4-point turn. It used to be a 2-point turn until we got our property line surveyed and found out that their road was actually 7 feet on our property. Then they have to go back down the hill. There are large semis and larger wheelbase vehicles that drive 140 yards up to their compound, offload, then have to back 140 yards back down the road, back down the hill, and they back down on Spanish Valley Drive to make their turn to get out there. And that's just an accident waiting to happen. And I'm pretty sure, you'll have to talk to the attorney, but I suppose that there's some exposure to liability there. I don't know. They've actually made an effort to keep the dust down. They've lined the road. They've had to redo it 3 times since the spring. They've been promising they would do it for the last 2 years. We had to have our property surveyed and the boundary put up, and they put some telephone ties down so that instead of making a 4-point turn before that, they were making a 2-point turn onto our property. And Commissioner Winfield got up and became an advocate for him, saying they didn't have a fair hearing. I told Jared when we notified code enforcement, they knew we were going to oppose it. I've spoken to Randy numerous times. There have been several issues like the garbage truck coming up in there at 6:20 in the morning with their beepers going and banging stuff around. I spoke to Randy about it. I've gone to the transfer station twice and spoke to the dispatcher to see if they quit doing that. And they didn't do anything until just recently this spring. They haven't tried to mitigate any of the problems until they've applied for a result. They finally got that stopped. It's just, and they made an effort with the dirt and they put the telephone poles down so people can't trespass on our property. It's just, we bought this property in 2012 and we were concerned about it. My wife was a realtor at the time, and we asked Randy Davis, the brokers for the seller, and he told us it was a home business, it was a sheet metal shop. So for the last 4 years, we've had 2 containers, a home office, several trade trailers, all of their vehicles. He said here in the first meeting, he said they had 20 part-time and full-time employees that are driving in and out there all day long. Last year, I had a trail camper up to trigger when anybody came up the road or came down the road. In a 1-week period, counting Saturday and Sunday, it triggered 494 times. That's just a lot of traffic. And no matter what they do to that road, if they brine it, with the heavy truck traffic and everything else going up and down there, it's just going to keep breaking down. And the dust has been a major problem. Plus, the guys will pull in there in the morning at 7 o'clock. They'll raise their motors. They have their stereos going. I've spoken to Randy about all of this, and he has made some effort to get them to slow down. In the wintertime, that hill they got to go up. The big trucks have to back up and take 2 or 3 runs to get up that hill. It's just a really unsafe situation.
Good. I think we better cut you off, but thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
My
Name
name
and
is
ad-
Shirley French. And as you all probably know, this isn't our first rodeo here. This illegal use has been going on for 2.5 years. And it's already come before the Planning Commission once before. It went on to the County Commission. And got bumped back to you again because supposedly there was some new information that needed to be considered. I've never heard what that new information is. What I think the new information is one of the commissioners wants to give his buddy a favor and rezone that property that sits on my property line. When I looked through it, they're asking right now for a neighborhood commercial, which, as I understand, hasn't even been incorporated into the zoning laws yet. And it specifically states right here in your own land use code, the neighborhood commercial district is designed to accommodate neighborhood retail uses serving the immediate surrounding residential neighborhood. Neighborhood retail uses provide daily and frequently bought items. And, you know, I could go on and on and on. What they have going on over there is light industrial. They are a huge warehouse. They manufacture in there. And they've been doing that illegally for more years than I can think about. And the road itself is unsafe. Their driveway, their operation is denying me the right to my peace and enjoyment of my own property. We invested a lot of money into our large lot residential property. And it's a nightmare having them operating over there the way they do. And I just beg and plead that you will do the right thing and send this down the road where it belongs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, come on forward and name and address.
My name is Amanda Jacobs and I live at 2771 Rimrock Road. I am Shirley's daughter. And I have 3 points to make here. So the first is there's a history of non-compliance with whatever is put forward that has been put forward with this company. I don't feel like permitting them for ill behavior or illegal operation or operating outside of the parameters of what everybody else is expected to do. That's not the right decision to make. This business is clearly out of its proper place. It belongs in a commercial zoning area. And all of the other heating and cooling companies in town, they're expected to adhere to that. This one shouldn't be an exception. And because it's being granted this consideration, I feel like this is sort of a spot zoning kind of liability because it's so clearly out of alignment with the neighborhood use. And then the other point that I would like to make has actually already been made. It's really that they're terrible neighbors. They're not going to comply with what's put before them just based on their previous history. It really looks a lot like spot zoning, which isn't the way to go about doing these things. And then the third is it's unfair. I mean, Bill Winfield made the point that he doesn't want to punish a business for growing. And I don't think that that's the intention of anyone. But why show favoritism to this business for operating in a way that they shouldn't be, when all of the other businesses just like them are having to do things by the proper regulations and the proper zoning? So that's all I have to say. I hope you'll consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other people who want to speak to this issue? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I will entertain a motion and then we can have a discussion.
I'll make the motion. I move to recommend an unfavorable recommendation to the county commission um, from LLR to NC neighborhood commercial based on the following findings of fact. This comes directly from the section in the land use code. The proposal in conformance with the policies, intents, and requirements of the Grand County General Plan doesn't meet those requirements. I also have gone through it and noticed that.
Mary, let's get a second, and then you should speak first. Or is that's not part,
That's part
of the motion?
motion.
Oh, it's part of the motion.
Yes, part of the, I'm sorry. I will, I'll yell. The proposed zone change is not in compliance with the general plan and the future land use plan. The proposal use is not compatible. It's adjacent to a neighborhood that has documented their concerns and have not or cannot be mitigated, the changes that need to happen. The public facilities are there, yes, part of what this question is, but the driveway is a driveway. It's not a road to a commercial site. Spot zoning could be iffy. There are other areas. It has constrained lands on the property, which is a part of the concerns. So it's a 45-foot drive from the Spanish Valley Drive to the top of this road, 45-foot drop of grade.
Mary, I don't know, but
Yeah.
and I'm supposed to kind of repeat it or make sure.
Okay.
Could we do kind of the more formal motion,
I'll
and
just do
then we'll
that.
get immediately back to you after.
I'm
a
sorry.
second.
I had
Sorry.
gone through it and written it as a motion based on what those things
Yes,
are.
Gotcha.
But we'll just go with the proposed zone change is not in compliance with the general plan. That works. It only needs one.
Do we have a second?
I just wanted a clarification because, Mary, it was kind of hard for me to catch what you said, but you did say that you are forwarding an unfavorable.
Unfavorable recommendation to the county commission.
I'll second.
Mary, would you like to say something discussion wise?
Sorry, yes, I will. And when I went through this whole thing and I was concerned about it, but one of my biggest concerns is that they're calling it a limited repair service, which would be a conditional use in that zone, which is still a use allowed, and that use would stay there. It would never go away because conditional uses follow the land. But it's not really a limited repair service. It's what the member of the audience said. It is a light industrial use, not a neighborhood commercial use. So it wouldn't even be allowed as a use if the zone changed. And that zone change, if it does change, stays. And I also listed a whole bunch of things that could happen, and we probably all read them within that zone if it did change, which still aren't compatible with that area. So that's what I have to say.
Further discussion?
I guess I'd like to just make a comment as well. There really are two things in my mind that concern me greatly about this. Number one is the location, being on a flag lot where it's literally surrounded by large lot residential. And the other one is the access road itself with the big grade and, the difficulty of turning around and so on. So those really are the two biggest factors. If this was actually down on the road itself and maybe next door to Packard, that I think I would view this in a whole different way. But due to those peculiarities with this lot, that's why I seconded the unfavorable motion.
Further comments? Tony looks like he's.
This one, Stephen, can you hear me? I've actually got a question for you that pertains to more terms of art stuff. Are you online still? If not, that's okay. I don't think it's that pertinent, but I want to make sure we've got it right. As far as I understand it, my curiosity is this body, we're stating what we call findings of fact, which as I understand it, is a term of art, not one that I've seen used here with this body at this time before. I don't know if we can determine what is a finding of fact. We can say the land use code states, but I don't know. I just want to make sure we're using that term of art correctly right now. That's just me.
Actually, when I made the motion, I said findings, I didn't say effect,
I know, but the motion that we have in the staff recommendation states findings.
because I knew there's it can't be the effect.
Yeah, we don't, I might just amend that to say following findings and not findings of fact. That's a very, very specific phrase.
You just said facts, right?
I didn't say facts, I
You
just
didn't
said
say
findings.
that, okay.
I guess I thought about this when we dealt with this. I think it was in the winter. And I had to do a lot of thinking about this because I think that on one hand, I'm like, oh, this is a good, like, there's a compromise here from just a commercial, like we're restraining the commercial for a needed service. And I feel that like these kind of services in Moab are like really needed, HVAC service and those kind of ideas. And I want to be like, yes, we need that. We need to change. We need to grow. We need to expand our zoning. And I'm like, oh, a neighborhood commercial, even though it doesn't fit what they're doing, I'm like, oh, well, that's like a compromise in a direction where like just not fully giving them a zoning where it's like you can, build a hotel or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's a thing in good faith. I see not good faith in like, ticking off the neighbors and whatnot. And then I also am like, I'm with Jerry in Mary with like, this is a flag lot. It's not in the land use code. Also, I rarely does staff give a recommendation, right? Like, it's like, okay, staff is putting a recommendation in a certain thing. I kind of believe in backing up the staff. I'm also, but I kind of like these kind of needed services need to go somewhere. And it's also like, it is near some other industrial or commercial uses in this area. So I'm like, I'm kind of torn on that for like an up zone. And, like this is kind of service that I was just looking at real estate. You can't find real estate in this area if you just do a Google search. I mean, something that's the closest compatible is $6 million, right? Like, so this is what my opinion is. If we kind of cut off businesses like this, I think what will happen is your AC system goes down. It's July 28th. It's 1,000 degrees out. And no one can come in Moab because this businesses are restricted. So you have to call somebody from Grand Junction. And they come out and they charge you $2,000 and they turn to screw. And I think this is like a concern for like people that live and work here on like, I mean, normal income, whatever kind of a group of people that can't afford like $2,000 to turn the screw on something. So that's kind of like, I also think that the county is like started to signal that they're going to start checking every home occupation business to see if they're in compliance. And I think we're going to have a lot of businesses that are going to get flushed out for being non-compliance, and they just don't upset the neighbors. And so like, these guys have upset the neighbors and drawn attention to it. So I just think as a county, like we're going to have to start dealing with the consequences of that, being like paying ridiculous price for services because the closest place to get them is Grand Junction. So.
Any further comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's my first day, so I'm learning a lot of this right now. And I share a lot of what you were just saying, Aaron. I want to see small businesses succeed in this town, but yeah, if you're making the neighbors this upset, I think, yeah, and something that stands out is the history that these guys have been violating over and over. It's kind of a red flag.
I'd like to ask staff a question about conditional use. And as part of this, because I know that we have to, if we were to change the zoning, it has to be what is current and not our, proposed future land use code and definitions. Can you clarify for me, one, if this was given the zone change, would this be permitted or would it be a commercial use? And I think I have a follow-up, but maybe we could start there.
So by permitted, do you mean would the business itself just be permitted or would the use go with the land?
Well, so I'm looking at the land use chart and I see all of the permitted uses and then the conditional uses, and I'm unclear whether them operating as their business, if that would be permitted and used by right, or if it'd be a conditional use and then follow up as well after that.
Yeah, give us just a second.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. This is Amy, and I think we're going to pull that up really quick to look at it, but I looked at it late in the night, Sunday night, getting ready for today, and I seem to recall it was a permitted use, but we're going to pull it up really quick and answer your question.
Okay.
And I think you had a second question if you want to ask that while we're looking.
Yeah, so that'll be conditional on, well, if it's a conditional use.
Okay.
If it is a conditional use, then I'm curious about what all goes into that and what sort of, for lack of a better word, control the county would still have in terms of compliance and things like that.
And Steve, it is a permitted use in the zone.
Okay, and I'm going to throw another question here. Well, yes, okay, I will. With the proposed future land use and the code and definition changes, would it then be a conditional use? If it's adopted as it currently is drafted now?
So Steve, I can't totally answer that question because we don't know what's going to happen with that proposed ordinance, and it will go for a recommendation to the county commission from this body. And to speculate on whether that's going to be approved or not, we just can't do.
Are you, because I see the iteration that we have before us here today in that draft version, how would that fall in there? And I completely understand what you're saying. And, the whole thing could be entirely scrapped. So it'd be, is entirely speculative.
Sure. Staff is looking through what is currently proposed. So hang on 1 minute.
It would be a conditional use.
So then in that case, what all goes, I'm just not very familiar with conditional uses. And so I asking that question of what goes into conditional use. So that way, I guess the county can have a little bit more say in what this business can or cannot do.
So I guess what I would say to that, and I understand your question. So this application is subject to whatever code was in effect at the time they submitted the application. So regardless of what happens with this code revision, they will not be subject to that. So, but let's say we denied it and they came back later once the code was changed or something, or they withdrew it is really their best bet. And then they came back when we revised the code, hoping that maybe it gave them some advantage. So what that advantage would be, I can't say at this point. I haven't had time to read all the code revisions. So I'm sorry, Steve, I really can't say. But a conditional use permit, generally speaking, is when a use needs to have special conditions on it that make it as compatible with the neighborhood as possible, where things have to be mitigated. So the neighbors spoke about noise. They spoke about trucks being unable to turn around. They spoke about those were the two biggest ones, I think, as far, and also the number of trips back and forth. So can those things be mitigated would be something you would be asking if it were presented to you as a conditional use permit. And then the commission would have to think, okay, are there conditions we could put in place that would mitigate those things? So that's what you would be looking at if this were in fact a CUP.
Perfect. Thanks for elaborating on that. That all makes a lot of sense. I guess I'd just share my perspective here, and sort of my thought process is, I certainly hear the nearby residents, the neighbors' concerns. And, that is certainly coming, something that is, I'm not taking lightly. I also really agree with a lot of what Aaron said. And I think, these sorts of services and industries, we need them to continue. If they're edged out, I'm skeptical on, how they're replaced. And so I'm looking at this from an angle of, well, what is the pathway to yes? And so it seems to me like, I don't like that it, in the current form of the land use code, it is permitted, because then that gives over a ton of rights and power to, something that really largely seems like it shouldn't be there. And then, we have one side of the story. I would love to hear what the applicants have to say. There's three sides to every story, and that's not to doubt anybody by any means. But I wonder if, it's the applicant's call, but I just wonder if holding off until there is land use code change, that if it does indeed stay as a conditional use, there could be a little bit more of a compromise found there.
Yeah, and I hear the commissioner's concerns over how to help small businesses continue and be viable and stay here in the county or the city, and I hear all those concerns. But I think for this commission, your charge is to look at, is this use permitted in the current zone that it is? Is it permitted in the zone that they're requesting? And is it in compliance with the requirements for a zone change? So as Commissioner Hoffine read her motion, she stated that it is not compatible with the general land use plan or the future land use plan map, and those two statements are correct. So as hard as it is sometimes to put some of those feelings aside, I think it's important for the Planning Commission and the county commissioners to look at what Commissioner Lindberg brought up as far as what can we, the county, do, what can the city do to make areas that are viable for these businesses. And I agree with what Commissioner Lindberg says about it's hard to find real estate. So I think that I know that the general land use plan is again under a revision right now, the land use code section. We have some consultants working on that. And we've got lots of code revisions happening. So I think that, looking at those things coming ahead is important, and taking that into consideration when you're looking at all these amendments.
I think Steven Stocks has a question.
I had one more question too.
So, yeah.
Oh, Stephen,
Go
you
ahead,
had a
Stephen.
question? Sorry.
Yeah, if the chair would recognize me. Just a reminder, where we are right now is it's a recommendation from this body. And I think it's really hard at times when we have a possible change in the land use code that is coming. We have to deal with the circumstances in which we find them. That's what the applicant's entitled to. And so I know that makes it difficult. This was before the Grand County Commission previously, and I know the commissioners wanted to see it, the possibility of it in a different format. And I think this is another attempt. Unfortunately for the applicant, currently it looks like the code doesn't necessarily fit with it. So just struggling with that. I understand that's difficult, but they're not yet applying for a conditional use permit. And because they're not in that circumstance, staff doesn't have the recommendations that they would need to make to make the findings that would be necessary to allow them to even be permitted under a CUP. So I think that's one thing that's also kind of another wrinkle in it, is that we have to view this based on the circumstances in which it's found. And it doesn't leave the Planning and Zoning Commission up, doesn't leave them wonderful or great options at times.
Jerry?
Just as a point of clarification, this is a request to rezone as neighborhood commercial. That's correct, right? And the services would be repair services general is what they're looking for. And in my mind, manufacturing sheet metal ducting fits not in general repair, but in light industrial. So if in fact they were to use this facility later for manufacturing sheet metal products, they would be non-compliant once more. I just wanted to make sure I had that right.
Any other comments? I'll just make one. I think my, many kind of concerns, but I just don't think it's a neighborhood commercial district thing. The way it, what they are doing, it is a service to the community, but it's not kind of neighborhood centered. So usually when I think of neighborhood commercial, maybe a small market, a coffee shop, but not something that is kind of absolutely spread out across the community. Yes, indeed, they may need heating, cooling devices, some neighbors, but it doesn't seem to fit. Well, I'm going to read it one more time. Neighborhood commercial district is designed to accommodate neighborhood retail uses, serving the immediate surrounding residential area. Neighborhood retail provides daily and frequently bought items. I just don't think it fits in there. So that's on my mind also. Any other comments? Are we ready to vote? Yes, Tony.
For staff, you mentioned that in the event that we do recommend denial, is what you wrote. I think forward an unfavorable recommendation is what Mary moved. I viewed those as synonymous. You mentioned that next steps would be that the county commission either sets some sort of timeline or precedent or condition with which they need to come into compliance or something penalties. I'm wondering at this point, is there a precedent or understanding for us to know what those look like? What they may look like? Is there 30 days, a week until the zone change? Is the code enforcement officer going to be out there tonight? Like, what really does that look like?
It's a good question, actually. So
you're going to give a try, huh?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question right now, but County Attorney Stephen Stocks might be able to, but I think that certainly it wouldn't be, you have 24 hours to cease and desist. I would imagine that the commission would give them a longer period of time, 30 days, 60 days, whatever that might be. And it might be based on if the applicant appears before the commission and expresses a hardship or, who knows. But I think County Attorney Stephen Stocks could probably answer that better, but they won't be given an extremely short amount of time to get things in order.
That was a bit of a leading question and a 1-2 punch. So I guess for Stephen, I'm wondering, is this body enabled as a planning commission to recommend to the county commission what an appropriate timeline for that compliance we feel would be?
And we have Stephen on the line maybe to speak.
Yeah, that's why I looked at him.
I'm here. So first, I think likely the commission, before we're able to, well, from my office, we normally get involved later on in the process to do the code enforcement. Likely Mr. Black, Brandon Black, will start with the complaint. He takes the complaint and says, look, you're out of compliance. And they try to get what's called a voluntary compliance process. If the voluntary compliance can't be had, then they'll turn it over to my office And we've had a couple of these. The other one that I can think of is the Easy Street application, where really it was going to be either in compliance or out of compliance based on the decision of the commission. In that case, for example, they went up to the commission denied the CUP, they appealed, and we held off on enforcement until all the dust settled on the appeal. So if it is rejected by the commission, likely we'll look at two folds. One, to see if there's a pending complaint process. If we can get voluntary compliance, that's what we always hope for. The county doesn't like to sue people. That's not one of the things they like. And I have seen from the county commission, which is, my client when it comes to lawsuits, they've been very willing to work with people because it's a lot easier to work with neighbors than to sue neighbors. And so that's going to be their approach. So don't, and I know the neighbors probably hearing this are like, oh, great, more time. But really it's part of the process that we try to get this cleaned up and done so in a way that everyone can kind of move forward through this process as quickly as possible. And so that's kind of the answer, kind of a non-answer, but it's not going to be tomorrow to figure all this out. It's going to take some time. And based on what their procedural setting, whether it be an appeal or not, that also plays into it as well.
Any other comments? I guess we're ready to vote. All in favor of the motion?
This is the motion for.
This is the motion to send an unfavorable recommendation.
So if we're in favor of this, it would be to send the unfavorable recommendation.
Yeah, we're opposed to this. Okay, how many are opposed? Steve?
Aye.
Okay, so we're done with that issue.
Just to be clear, the unfavorable recommendation.
It means, yes, that we're not supporting this rezone.
Who's on first?
Everybody? Yep, okay. Okay, I guess we are ready to go into general business, and that's a discussion of the land use amendments. A nice long discussion.
Nice long discussion.
Believe it or not, this will be the longer part of the meeting.
You guys are entitled to the break if you want.
I'll just let you guys know I have a family obligation. I have to leave here at 6:30. Got plenty of time for now. Run late sometimes.
So we'll plow ahead, and if we get another hour in, maybe we'll take a break.
We were just chatting about who was going to start. So I might just, again, I'm Amy Weiser, the new planning director. So this is my first day. So we have that in common.
And Amy, where are you from? A little bit of background?
Sure. So I've been in planning over 20 years. A lot of my planning history is in the state of Oregon. I moved here in 2016 as the planning director for the city of Moab. And I was there for 2 years. And then I went to work for a company here that does land development. So I did that for a number of years, and then COVID happened and I was laid off. And so I've been doing lots of different things since then, but decided it was time to get back into planning and hopefully I can help the county through some of the things going on right now. And so staff filled me in on the code revisions today. I'm made aware that there are code revisions here tonight. I have not had a chance to really go through them. I did have a chance to speak with our building official today, our county engineer today. I also am aware that we have some consultants working on a general plan amendment, and I'm hoping to talk with them, I believe, on Thursday. So, as I stated to staff today, with this general plan amendment happening to the land use element of the general plan, my training and my history and my background, you generally want that general land use plan amendment to happen, especially when it's to the land use element of the general land use plan. You generally want to wrap that up before you go through and do a whole bunch of code revisions. So just in my one day here, my recommendation to the Planning Commission would be to table this item until that general plan amendment has been completed. And that's just my general look at it in the last 8 hours. So I just wanted to share that with you. We're happy to run through all of the code revisions. We've got some public comments. There's a lot in there. There is quite a few code revisions in there. And I know sometimes there's pressure to hurry and get it done. So sometimes there's pressure to maybe, let's just pull this out and approve this part. Maybe we won't approve all of the code revisions. And so again, I just, as we move forward, I just encourage the commission to really look at those and take the time that you need. And I encourage you to really think about this general plan amendment that's happening right now. There's a lot of things that could be happening with that, which would then be in contradiction with what you might approve with these code revisions right now. And then we're in another cycle of having to change things. So that's just my initial look at it today. But we're here to do whatever the commission pleases to do. We're here to answer questions. We can go through whatever you want to go through, and ultimately the decision's up to you. But I just wanted to put that out there for you.
Well, great question. How to proceed. I'm not against tabling, but maybe people would have questions of what they read that were particularly important to them, and in terms of, well, why would you do such and such in this part of the code? But Tony.
I would thank you very much for your, in general, robust attention to detail in an 8-hour time frame. That's pretty cool.
I've done this for a while.
That's pretty cool. I tend to agree with your idea that planning is a process by which you set intention informed by public opinion, which is where we're at. And code should reflect the enforcement of that intention. And so as a process exercise, I like where you're at there. We don't want to have to do 2 land use code revisions in 3 years. That's the way we do it at the state. The plan every 10 years, a land use code or statute revision every session. Planning happens less frequently and paints in broader strokes.
I had a question though. Was my understanding that there was some kind of a timeline associated with this round of land use code changes?
Yeah, and if Stephen Stocks might have gotten, I don't know if he's off. So again, my limited understanding from today, from getting some background from our county engineer, and I'll let staff chime in as well. But there was some discussion today that there was some time limit on this code revision, and that time limit that was expressed to me was 180 days. So I asked further questions about where did this come from, what is happening. And so to my knowledge, that came from and this is just from talking with various county employees, is that this direction came from the county commissioners, but that it is not tied to any state regulations, any time frame set up in application processing. This is the county putting forth these revisions as not an applicant, so we're not under any time frame gun in that respect. But I was told it was at the direction of the county commissioners, and I was also told that was up about a week ago, the 180 days.
And Trish, you're probably out for that, but she's basically saying there was a kind of 180-day time. Is that roughly right? I just kind of a suggestion, not a command
or a legal requirement.
It was definitely unique putting that 180 days.
Yes.
Yeah, it was definitely something that was highly recommended. Specifically, Captain Walker really wanted
were mentioning things, I'm gonna use the word like some random encumbrances on that timeline. Do we have a contractual obligation to get deliverables wrapped up with the consultant in that 180 days?
So that's a separate thing. So we've got this code revision that was at the direction of the county commissioners, and that's where that 180 days came from. The consultants that we currently have for the general plan amendment.
Those are the general.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my understanding is that they were hoping to wrap that up by November.
Okay.
So whether that in fact happens, we will see. But it would be great if that were done by the end of this year, and then we could look at these code revisions fairly soon. But we'll see. I'll meet with them on Thursday, and we'll see where they're at.
Is there a reason why the 180 days was recommended by Kevin Walker?
I think probably so we
Just get it done.
do it done.
Yeah.
But the basic question was, is there a reason why it was set at 180 days?
I don't know if that was a recommendation from the county attorney. You mean that just the time frame itself? I don't know. So are you guys discussing whether to extend it?
Well, I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I would say there is nothing to extend. There is no process to extend it. It was just a recommendation and a wish and a hope that maybe we could get it done in 180 days. But there's no formal process whereby we would ask for an extension or anything.
And you were out, but I think some of the rationale is we don't have a future land use map, et cetera.
Right.
And we might have to go right through this process and amend stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But we're getting close to getting those.
Yeah, I hope so.
I remember when my first couple of weeks here, my first couple of times here, that was my question too, was why are we doing a land use change when we don't even have the general, we're still working on our general plan. And I always thought 180 days was way too short. I mean, I don't remember making code changes this big ever less than a year. So I was really concerned about it.
I agree, and it might be helpful to have a more comprehensive process for the land use code revision. I just, in speaking with the few staff members that I spoke with today that are in different departments, they felt like they hadn't had a chance to review it, and I don't know how much. I feel like there could be more work to make sure that one thing that was brought up was something about the floodplain, and again, I haven't read it. Maybe not being in compliance with what our current building code says about the floodplain. So just some of that coordination and making sure all the departments are talking to each other and that the code reflects those things, I feel is extremely important.
There are, I'm a floodplain person, so I'm kind of honed in on that stuff. There are also many changes to FEMA and the flood insurance and the NAHP coming down into the next year or so. They've been promising for a couple of years. Especially if we have a lot of code revisions that address that, knowing that those things are going to be coming down nationally and at the state level. Additionally, I would feel like it's a poor form to rush a substantial code revision through the process while new staff may not have had an opportunity to completely and comprehensively understand the purpose and reasoning behind various code changes to begin with. It's one of those things, it's like, you don't want someone to be on for 2 months and then ask them to write a new book, right? That's
sure.
That's not being a good team owner, team manager.
Sure, and I appreciate that, but I also want to make clear I'm not trying to derail any process. I'm not trying, I think that code revisions are needed, and I think that a general land use plan map and general land use plan amendments are needed. And so I'm just looking out for the county, and I want to make sure that those, as you mentioned very eloquently earlier, Commissioner Mancuso, was you set your intentions, and then your code should reflect those intentions. And so my concern is we're setting code before the intentions. So that's really looking for the county. That's what I'm looking at.
Should we have a motion to table? I motion to table this for at least 2 weeks to another planning commission for review. Like, that's what I'm getting from you. Like, you want to
Well,
catch up?
I think my suggestion, this is just my feeling about it, is that I feel it should be tabled
All right.
until the general land use plan amendment is further along. We should at least have a draft of this general plan use amendment to see where is this even going as it relates to these proposed code revisions where they are right now. And then we might want to adjust some of those code revisions seeing the draft. I would also caution, I would wait for that general plan amendment to be adopted. That doesn't mean we can't have a draft code revision in place and kind of be ready to go as we have public meetings on the plan amendment and we get a pretty firm draft going. We could still be working on those code revisions kind of in tandem, but things change, you know, as you see it at commission meetings, some things can change. So that would be kind of a moving target on that document if we're trying to do it at the same time. But it would certainly give us an idea of what would stay the same or what would change.
I thought maybe address it like we want to keep this on the burner.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, you can say let's table until we have a draft of the, or you could say let's table until the general plan amendment is adopted. I mean, you could, or you could say
Can I
let's
just say a time until Bryson's face starts to smile? 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
6.
Yeah. Yeah. Another way is to say table. You can also say table indefinitely. I mean, it's up to you to choose that time frame. But my recommendation would be that general plan amendment needs to be out there for public viewing for the commissioners to see before we start trying to address this code revision.
I had one other comment regarding the timing as well. That is, I've spent a fair amount of time going through the details, and it's not the first time. I've done this a couple times, and every time I see more in there, right, I have more questions. Actually, I'd like to have a conversation about one piece of this with Mary, because I really don't understand the impact one of these would have from a practical standpoint. So maybe sometime tonight we can do that.
Absolutely.
But I guess the question that I'd have, or the comment I'd have for the rest of the planning commission is, I would like to continue to get updates both on the land use code changes and on the future land use plan as work goes, because part of our job is to give that feedback and make sure that, you know, things happen in a direction that we all expect they would. So even if we table it, I would like to see it tabled in a way that we continue to have feedback on the progress in quite a bit of detail.
I agree. And I don't know, I'll try to find out tomorrow. I don't know, I know that there's consultants working on this. I don't know if I know that we have a meeting on Thursday with a number of departments that are meeting with the consultants. So I'll try to find out and report back to you if there's, if we're going to have a planning commissioner kind of be on a review of the draft, you know, things like that. So
I think all of us have met with the consultants at least once, some of us more than once.
Great.
Yeah, we're kind of on board. Well, I guess we understand generally the direction they're taking.
Okay.
And we've been getting updates, probably every third meeting or so.
Okay, good.
So it's been a good feedback, but I'd like to see that continue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
But if I understood you, what you still will want to ask some questions about what's, because for me also, it's kind of fresh in my mind. And I only have 2 or 3 kind of big questions, you know, not about should this be permitted or, should we go ahead and try to table this and then have that discussion?
But
we still need a motion, I think, a refined motion here.
I mean, motion to table indefinitely.
We have a second for that. Tony won. Any discussion?
I do have a piece just to add. Sorry. And I just got this from Chrissy, the county attorney's office. Basically, it was giving the justification for the 180 days, if anybody's interested. And it is something that is going into effect on November 1st, 2024. And it is the applicant's entitlement to land use application approval.
So that would, okay.
So this is something that I can send to all of you. And essentially, an applicant who submitted a complete land use application, including payment, is entitled to substantive review of the application under the land use regulations.
So I would just say that's fabulous. I'm glad that they're doing that, but that does not apply to our code revision.
So the county shall process an application without regard. Yeah, okay. So essentially, the 180 days is written into that, but that's for an applicant as well.
That applies to a specific application.
It would apply to an applicant that fills out a form, submits an application, pays a fee. We, the county, are initiating these updates. So I don't believe we can talk to her some more, but regardless, that doesn't come into effect until November. So it's
She
not.
said, "Oops, sorry, wrong code."
Okay. So anyway, I think that you're well within your purview and your authority as the planning commission to make a motion on this and do what you feel is best to make the right decision.
Any other discussion? All in favor of tabling? Steve?
Aye.
That's unanimous. One abstention. One abstention.
I abstain. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Catch you over there.
I got it.
Okay, hit us with questions and we'll do our best to answer those questions on the revisions that are proposed right now.
Go ahead.
So the first one of the questions is really, I think, Mary, you could probably get better feedback on this than anybody because of your experience, but on page, I can cite the page, or I guess I don't know if I need to. On page 8, letter A, it talks about reducing residential density allowed in highway commercial from 18 dwelling units per acre to 5. And we've had a lot of conversation about highway commercial and its applicability. Now, I don't know that I actually have any heartburn about that one way or another. I do hate to see density decreased when we have a land problem, which probably is the big heartburn. But from a practical standpoint, have we actually had people build 18 dwelling units per acre in highway commercial? Do you remember any of that?
A lot of them.
That would,
Rim Village, most of the condos are all in the highway.
Rim,
commercial.
yeah, that's right.
We don't have subdivisions, obviously, but the condos are all in highway commercial.
So yeah, I guess that'd be one that I would say we should look at as to, is that really applicable or not? Maybe it's applicable in certain areas, but maybe the best way to look at that is when we go through future land use planning to.
Well, and also when you go through these land use changes, they go through public hearings. So you're going to get public coming in and talking about it. So you'll get more information back from them. It's obvious if it's something that's not a good idea, we're going to hear about it. Council and planning commission will both hear about it. County commission and county. We'll both hear about it. So it's a public process. That's the reason I always thought this was going so quickly, because the public generally comes in and has a lot to say.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll have to table it because there is so much public discussion and things coming in. So, and I love the idea of keeping in contact with staff so that we know what's happening. So we don't have it all in front of us in one day.
Yeah.
So we get a little bit of it every day.
We're sorry, it looks like there is someone that's on that would like to comment on the code revision. I believe it's the gentleman that submitted the comments. So if you want to let Harry Holland speak, I don't know if he heard that we tabled it, but we can certainly let him speak to his comments.
So Harry, we're ready to let you speak. Sorry.
And when he's done, I actually had 4 things. That was good. So we can go back to my 3 later.
think you're
we
muted,
can't hear you.
Harry.
Yeah, you're muted.
Okay, how about that?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I know it's a big, huge change with the land use codes. I can imagine what a job that is. But so I'm in Castle Valley. I live on 74 Bailey Lane, Harry Holland. And I've been working with a group of people in Castle Valley to do some research on other counties and how they handle their range and grazing minimum acreage. So I did send some written information. We've got a report that we did. We looked at 14 different counties in Utah. So we've got a summary of the way they handle range and grazing type lands in their county. So you can see that if you'd like to. But if I could just look at three counties, because we thought that the way they handle the range and grazing was pretty interesting. So our next door neighbor, Emery County, has got they call it a mountain zone, and they have 80 acres as a minimum in their mountain zone. And if I could just read real quick from their land use description. So the mountain zone, 80-acre minimum, they say that lands in this area are described as containing numerous reservoirs, streams, and areas of snowpack, as well as forested areas and steep slopes. The public concerns in this zone are prevention of forest fires and the health of the forest, which in turn affect the water supplies in the communities of Emery County. So that seemed very applicable to Grand County as well. The next one is up above Salt Lake, Morgan County. They've got some really interesting things, but just as a highlight, and this would be, if you want to, yeah, so that's what you're showing on the screen is the 14 counties we looked at. What I'm looking at is the very first page that's got kind of a summary of interesting things. So Morgan County, they've designated what they call a multiple use zone with 160 acres minimum. And the purpose of that zone is to establish areas in mountain, hillside, canyon, desert, and other open and generally undeveloped lands where human habitation should be limited in order to protect land and other open space resources. So that's an interesting way to look at it too. Right next to Morgan County up there is Weber County. And I've also sent a copy. They came up with a sensitive lands overlay zone, and I sent a copy of that. It's got some good maps in there. What their big goal there is to minimize the potential degradation of natural and human-made resources by identifying the cumulative impact on known sensitive areas. So, Castle Valley is surrounded by range and grazing zoning. So it's pretty important to us. So we'd like to be involved how we can as y'all go through the land use code revisions. So thanks a lot, and thanks for letting me comment, and let us know if y'all have any questions that we can help you with.
Great, thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing a lot of that research for us. We'll definitely read through it.
Okay, great.
Three more, and I don't know if they're really points or questions, but article on page 8, there's a reference to Article 10 definitions and talk about some red lines, but I could not find those in the packet. So did I just miss those?
Red lines, the document that Elisa sent everybody.
Well, anyway, I couldn't find Article 10. You couldn't either. So anyway, I would love to review those. If you wanted to send them out at your leisure, that'd be great.
What section was that again?
Article 10.
Oh, the definition.
Definition.
Okay.
So I didn't just miss
The Google Doc, right?
Just a couple other real small things. On page 12, there's a reference to upper story residential, and I couldn't find anything in residential zoning. Mary, you can probably just answer this off the top of your head, or maybe.
Don't pressure me.
Yeah.
It's in neighborhood.
Where would something like an apartment above a garage go? Wouldn't that be a second floor?
It's neighborhood commercial, I think is what they're referring to, because then it
Okay.
was the apartment above the
Alright.
business.
That's where that was.
Actually, we had tried for a long time. Trying to spend
Well, and I do think that's where working with the building official comes into effect, because there are quite a few building codes that deal with a mixed use building. And so when you mix commercial and residential, there's additional building code requirements that come in, and sometimes those can be pretty costly. And so that's sometimes that maybe deters that situation from happening. I'm told that that's getting a little better these days as far as some of those requirements. I've been out of it for a little while, but it does add some cost to doing something like that.
it's a fire.
I had one other question. That is, on page 12 of 97, there's educational facilities, and within that is all other educational facilities, and they're noted as permitted pretty much throughout most of the residential. And I guess what brought that to my attention first was that I expect things like online learning are going to get a lot more popular in the future, a lot more affordable, more people will take advantage of it. And sometimes there are some places where occasionally you may go in for support or whatever. So, and I was wondering, does that fit in this all other educational facilities? And I guess that really is the question, is what in the heck would be in that bucket of all other educational facilities? You know, not a 5-story building to house a new university, right? Obviously not, but what the heck fits in there? It's a big bucket and it's permitted pretty much all the way across.
Yep, that's a good question. So we'll look into that one.
Okay.
I don't know what that means right now either. I mean, my head went to trade schools, or, you know, esthetician training, or sometimes there's like EMS training in a different kind of building. That's kind of where my brain went, but I don't know without really looking at that.
But you wouldn't set up,
Yeah, or
After
trade
school
schools.
enrichment places. I know in cities those are becoming pretty popular, like Kumon, those kind of places.
yeah, I could see doing training for accountants in your living room, but I couldn't see doing training for welders in your living room. So,
We have an application before us at this time for an educational facility in range and grazing where it is allowed. This is a spend the night and learn things out in the wild educational facility.
that's
So this would include overnight accommodations. So just keep in mind that educational facilities can mean a great number of things and include a great number of things.
I saw the field research stations and environmental education centers, and I guess that'd fit under environmental education, wouldn't it?
Depending on what they say they're going to teach out there.
Yeah.
But that's a good point.
It's my favorite thing to do, but we're gonna have, if we really want to go down that road, we're gonna have to talk about accreditation. It's like those things actually matter.
Yeah.
And what kind of
What
facilities
is-
require that and
is
which ones don't.
Is it actually educational, or am I just yelling at my employees?
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So Chair, about so we put a motion to postpone and table. How I feel with this process has been, we had a workshop with the General Commission, and I have felt that, like, I agree with Jerry on several of his points. I have felt that I put in like recommendations. I just felt like we needed another, like just a planning commission workshop where we sit down with staff and went by point. I was really feeling like that. Like I saw this come up and I was like, oh, okay, I guess we talked about this, and there's stuff I don't like in there, but there was some things that I felt really needed to be changed before we did this. And I would just put out there, I would want, you know, whenever we feel we'll have another workshop, with it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a great idea.
Just wanted to point out it's 6 o'clock and I think we might have some more people.
Yeah, the applicant that we had earlier.
We've already had the public hearing on the rezone. So that was our first item. And I guess that's all I can say. Except that the rezone request was turned down by us anyway. But of course, there is the county commission.
Can I request the citizens be heard again?
Do you want to hear them anyway?
I think, yes, if you want to hear them, that's great. The problem is that we closed the public hearing, so. Yeah. And we apologize. We did switch the order. So I think it would be important. It looks like you're here for the applicant. Yeah, so,
No, it says it's before 6.
okay. But you can certainly have the applicant speak, but it wouldn't be part of the record at this point because you've closed the public hearing. So I'm just cautioning you about that. So I think that you should certainly let him speak and hear what he has to say. Okay.
My agenda looks different. I'm not gonna, my agenda after the citizens to be heard at 6 p.m. has future considerations. There may be 2 agendas out there, but I'm
No, there's the one for
Just
county commission.
very sorry.
That was the 4th of my 4. Thanks.
So what we're doing now is talking about the land use code updates. Let's see. Couple of things. One is I probably agree with Harry Holland. Haven't talked to him about this issue. I brought this issue up a long time ago because I'm from Oregon, you know, and I can't remember. You can tell us exactly. It may be you can have 100 acres or 80 acres and put one residence on it, you know, to preserve kind of rural land. So one thing I would hope that we would at least consider and discuss is for our own range and resource district having one unit per 20 acres. I, for some reason, kind of thought that might be what it would be. And I think the kind of argument is, if this is really for kind of resource and protecting the environment, et cetera, in kind of these areas that I guess Harry was talking about, it is important that somebody can put a house down on there, put in a septic tank, and put in a well. When you start saying more houses than would normally be permitted in a one house situation, then I think that's kind of diluting it. But it's nice to see it on here because it takes us at least away from just range and grazing in these kind of vast areas that are on the outskirts here that do have some problems with fire and levels of service and stuff. So just wanted to mention it. The second thing I want to mention, it's a project I'm interested in. It is on page 5 of 97. And it's just the background. And of course, it's not actually in here. It's talking about all the things this thing's going to cover. And then it says, and applying the water source protection overlay standards covered in the EPA sole source aquifer to Castle Valley region. Actually, we should be Castle Valley and the Glen Canyon aquifer. And I think now with this delay, I'm going to propose that, you know, something be written up on it. I did talk with Trish one time, Dan Stenta, and Lisa Martin and I all met together and kind of talked about extending some kind of protection to the sole source aquifers. And I have a one pager that I think I want to give to you. And it just says, here's two things you could do. One is, it's basically put it under the WSPO, I always forget, source protection overlay, right? And but with some modifications, because that was designed for places where you have the wells that supply our water and are covered by state stuff. So I think people should still be allowed to build a septic tank, drill a well on their property, and they wouldn't be under the WSPO because they didn't want people drilling right in those particular areas. Anyway, a couple of exceptions. Another one is the reduction in the density of housing. It's the WSPO has a 1/2 density reduction immediately. And this says it'd be up to the county council depending on stuff. Anyway, I'll give you that, but I would love to see us work on that, and I don't think it would be too difficult. And as I hand this over to you, staff writes these things. These are just a couple of suggestions, right? And so it may not end up looking like I suggested. So those are my two kinds of things, and then here's such a minor thing, but Jerry got into minor things. On page 77, what am I doing? 9.16.3, it's talking about aquifers. Somehow it's just point D is missing some words. It says, the purpose is just doesn't have it. So that's just kind of a typo type thing to look at. And Aaron, you had several, I think we should work in a workshop, but did you have some suggestions, things that puzzle you?
Oh, well, I mean, I've been beating this drum for a while. Like the ADU restriction, I just think the one where it's a deed restriction in an area that's already restricted to neighborhood or for a residential use, that deed restriction throws up hurdles for lendability and puts more hurdles on potential people, locals buying places. I'm like, that's what I'm kind of like, hey, I feel like we've thrown a lot of suggestions and stuff at this. And I'm like, we make a comment, staff goes, changes stuff, make a comment. I'm like, I just feel like that workshop is a theme that we can really talk about, massage some things in there. That I thought the thing that Jerry was saying about the reduction of density was a big one for mine, and then that ADU thing I just wanted to bring up again. So I think we should, to me, that one is, I don't know, I feel like that has been, I feel like each one of you have talked to you about this individually and you agree with me, and then it never makes it to the thing. I'm like, how is that possible? It's really frustrating. So that's just one of my pet peeves.
Didn't the state code change a lot of the ADU requirements? So I think that's where some of the ADU things were happening.
Yeah.
Current changes because the state made those changes, right? Absolutely.
You're in a residential zone that does not allow nightly rentals. So so what would the deed restriction do? Yeah. So the counter argument is that it throws a barrier to lendability. And I mean, I'll straight up say it. I would like to build one in the city, won't cite a deed restriction. And this is the type of housing we want. I think we really want these things. I feel that saying that that's the only way to track them, I'm just not buying it. I'm just like, I don't know. Don't we have other, I can't rent a room out in my house. I never set a deed restriction for that. So should I just start doing it and see if I get caught? I mean, that's what I feel like you're saying is well, you know, we have all these houses that can't be used for nightly rentals. So what would be the difference for making another house that can't be used for nightly rentals? If it's such an important tool for enforcing it, okay, I guess. I don't know.
And also we should figure out what the livability problem really is.
Yeah, no, 100%. I keep digging into this and I'm like, well, I mean, I've heard from two people that deal with lending that, yeah, this is totally an issue. So I don't know. That's why I'm just kind of like,
That would be a good topic.
right.
Related to that, the county doesn't currently have any type of deed restriction administration. We don't have any way to track. The HOSU is currently tracking the HDHO deed restrictions, and the existing entities that have created deed restricted housing are tracking what they created, but there's no centralized deed restriction administration. It's something we very badly need. I don't know if Brandon is tracking like ADOs in particular, or if anyone is, but just the deed restriction doesn't do much if there's no way to check in on it.
Right. So I feel like how if my neighbor had a legal nightly rental, I would call code compliance, and that's how it's done, right? Like, so it's like, do we need that deed restriction when it's already restricted? That's my thing.
Yeah, no, those are good points. So I think I've written that down so we don't forget to talk about it some more. Yeah, and certainly to Mikhail's point, you know, asking a few lenders, you know, what we've heard this rumor, what is the situation? You know, it's worth asking.
Yeah, I've had Bernie write a letter to the commission we had on this, but I would like to get other perspective too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. One question I just have in relation to workshops. Do you prefer to have a workshop before the regularly scheduled planning commission, like an hour before, or would you prefer it be on a whole different day?
Some of us are gainfully employed.
And some of
Yeah.
us are retired.
So, rub it in, Obi.
Gainfully is
Yeah.
awfully broad.
I can speak for that.
Yeah. But while you're all here in the same room, it might just be nice to hear a preference, you know, like sometimes entities do workshops right before the regularly scheduled meeting because it's a day that you're used to coming, and maybe it's helpful to just have to come an hour early or stay an hour late. But for some people, that's still a hard thing to do. So is it better to have it on a whole different day, or what do you guys think?
Steve says same day. I'm of the same mind.
Okay.
Mondays are already nuked.
Yeah, okay.
There's no reason
Okay.
to shoot a second horse, you know.
Okay.
And then also if the code changes were like separated. so you don't
Absolutely.
just as much. You know, if we have the whole thing.
Yeah.
We're never gonna get through it.
No, I agree. I agree.
Just pieces of the
Yeah.
process. And we can talk about it at that point. I think that works better.
Yeah.
We also then gotta remember that whatever new piece you bring, the next piece might have some other parts.
Sure.
Things I noticed in here.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna have to put a disclaimer in there because the land use, the general plan currently has all of the code names, the land use names as what they are currently are. Well, if you change them,
Yeah.
and they don't match the general plan or
Yeah.
other areas in the land use code.
Right.
So those things, a disclaimer somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
Been added to that.
I agree. And so that's, I think, holding off on the workshop for a little while. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. And then we'll revisit that. We'll talk about the best way to schedule those and how to handle those. But I agree, sort of piecemeal is easier to swallow.
Oh, we
yeah.
so, a year, and I was like, oh,
yeah.
I guess we're ready. Okay.
Yeah. Let's
Okay,
hit,
yes, we agreed on everything.
Yeah, we'll hit one section at a time, and we'll take notes as to whether it affects another section. And so, but yeah, I agree
Get
with.
me out of work early if it's before.
Okay, all right.
If it's before that.
And it's same day. It's okay with me too, as long as we're a couple weeks out. So
Yeah,
I can
okay.
schedule stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just like to chime in here, and I'll be very brief on this. So I think Jerry kind of already hit on it, and maybe it was Aaron who kind of seconded it a little bit. But just to earmark that I have a certainly an interest in that change of density, or that proposed change of density of the highway commercial from whatever it is, 18 units to 5. I would just really like to dive into that and do sort of a cost benefit analysis, because I think that may be where we could get some multifamily for moderate to lower income. And I understand that probably the intention of minimizing that is probably to dissuade developers from higher end condos for second and third homeowners. But I don't want to totally diminish any potential for affordable housing, or even just more affordable housing. Sort of the old throwing the baby out with the bathwater metaphor. So just kind of earmarking that, I think that would be an especially helpful one to dive into, pros and cons.
Steve, was the discussion when it was put that way, when we put the 18 units into the highway commercial, it was specifically just hoping that we'd get more affordable housing. Because who wants to live in a highway commercial zone? So, and it just implied.
And also, Steve, I think I've said a couple of times, but this suggestion hasn't been taken, which is this incentivizing. So you only can do 5 in the highway commercial, but if you have affordable housing or housing for the local workforce, you could have higher density, which then kind of more guarantees that that's what that's going for. And then you might say, Steve, though, that that then involves deed restrictions and stuff, so that's a bit of a barrier also. But I would probably like to see those incentives built into that 5.
I wonder if, Steve, I think you're right. A deep dive into that would be a good idea.
Yeah, OB, you brought up a good point, and I think that would be a conversation to certainly have and discuss that. What are all the channels to tweak that so it's really going to serve the county in the ways that we want to serve.
Also, I have a concern with all the changes that are made. How many non-conforming uses are you going to end up with? And we know how those work. No matter all non-conforming uses, they can turn into a problem if we don't be careful.
Yeah. Those are all really good comments. Thank you.
Any other comments? Well, there are now no citizens to be heard. And future considerations.
I was going to ask if we could do another update on future land use plan and the survey. We kind of talked about that a little bit, not about the survey.
I can give a quick update on the survey. We've had 57 responses so far. Results are all over the place. I've sent them to the consultants. Yeah, I don't think that because they're so all over the place, I can't probably give quite a summary yet, but yeah, there's definitely been a lot of participation, which was great.
Is the survey all online?
And I just have a question. Number one, Katie, this is the end. So you did have future plans. You mentioned 3 meetings ago. Where do you stand now? Are we going to get you to stay in Moab?
I'm going to try to stay in Moab. Let's just say that.
Motion to adjourn?
Well,
I got another future.
Yes, very good.
Okay, this is I was kind of ex parte in the hallway right before a meeting started. Okay, a friend of mine wanted to build a shed over the weekend on his place, and then the neighbor's upset and tells him he goes call code enforcement, and he calls me because I don't know why, but so, yeah. So I went through our code, and I'm like, I couldn't figure out the setback to just put like a machine shed on a rural residential. And I'm just like, man, there's a thing about use, like I put a shed on my place and I was like, I could find in the city code, okay, it's inflammable material 5 feet. I could find it in the city. Can't find it in the county. And I just feel like those are the things that like just your Joe Schmo citizen tries to like do on the weekend kind of thing. And granted, they should probably call or whatever, but I'm just kind of like, I did find it interesting that that's like something people kind of like doing and they can't figure it out. So
Unlike the city code, our code has a search bar. You can literally put in the
I
word
put in
shed.
shed.
You can put in setback. You can put in.
Can't find it. I at least
I can help you.
Granted, I'm dumb. So like, if I can't understand it, I can't. You know, I'm just saying. You know,
Accessory uses.
yeah. I put in the search bar all this stuff, and I'm just kind of like, man. User friendliness. I sometimes wonder about. You know, and that's something that a lot of people have asked me about actually, and they all live in the city, and I just am like, you live in the city. I don't know. I can't tell you. You should call the planning department. So I'm
Always a good idea.
I'm just throwing that feedback out there that like, you know, there's a lot of shed builders
Yeah.
and they can't figure out stuff. So
Thank you.
Find in advance.
yeah,
No, but that's, it's good feedback that when you try to find something, you can't find it. So that's always good feedback for us to look at, okay, why can't somebody find that? So I've seen some places on their websites where they can drill that down kind of quicker and easier. We're just, are you a resident? Is there a project you want to do? Yes, and then you click on that, and then sometimes, okay, I want to build a shed. I want to pave my driveway. I want,
Have frequently asked questions on the
building department page. Yeah, so there you go.
Before we move to adjourn, from a future land use plan update standpoint, Amy, could you just put that on your list for maybe a month out or something like that? Does that sound
To do
reasonable?
another update?
Yeah, just to let us know where, that'll probably give you enough time to kind of get your feet wet and you could,
Yep. Yeah, they are coming in September 24th.
oh, well, that's probably
So-
adequate then.
And want to meet.
That's
up
about
with you
6
guys,
weeks
so-
out. That'd be
Yeah, but
perfect.
I know we're meeting with them Thursday, and then I know that September 24th, correct me if I'm wrong, was to do an actual public meeting. Is that correct? An open house. Yeah. So I'll find out more details on that, but
Yeah, maybe we could do an update before the open house.
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
That's a second. I'll give it to Aaron because he hasn't gotten the second yet.
Oh.
And all in favor? Aye. I was his favorite.
Tony, are you late for your dinner?
Not yet. No, I've got about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Philandering.